Good morning, I'm Keith Davenport with the County Manager's Office, and I'm here with Dan Robeson. He's the Deputy Director of Emergency Communications for Johnson County. We're going to talk a little bit about last week's storms, the Sirens, and NotifyJoCo this morning. Last week, of course, we had those weather events Wednesday night and Thursday, and so we got a lot of questions from you, and we wanted to take some time to answer those questions. So Dan, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how the Sirens work and how those are laid out for us.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So the Sirens, the outdoor warning sirens in Johnson County, are part of a comprehensive system that we have to notify the public of severe weather. So that entails not only the outdoor warning sirens, but also messages from NOAA Weather Radio and EAS alerts that you would see on cable. We want to make sure that people have multiple ways, including through NotifyJoCo, of getting word of severe weather, especially tornado warnings. So the sirens are what we get asked about most because
sure. You either hear them or you don't. Yeah, you
exactly,
can hear them, yeah.
Exactly. And so we have had sirens in the county for a very long time, and we have about 197 of them in the county. They're owned and maintained by the cities and one township, but the county is responsible for activating them for live events, for tornado warnings. And then also we do the weekly test, or I'm sorry, the monthly test on the first Wednesday of every month. But this here is kind of shows how the sirens are strategically located throughout the county. Each of these triangles represents a siren and its location, and then the pink buffer zone area there shows, based on the manufacturer, what area should be able to hear the sirens.
Okay, so just to give folks a little bit of frame of reference, this is Olathe here, Gardner's down here, that side would be part of Zone 1. Lenexa's up here, part of Overland Park. We have Leawood here, Stillwell, Spring Hill, and of course DeSoto's there, and Bonner Springs and Edwardsville at the very north part of the county there.
Exactly. And anytime we talk about the outdoor warning sirens, we want to make sure to stress that they are outdoor warning sirens. They're meant to be heard by people that are outdoors. Even if you can hear them indoors, when we do the test, you may not be able to hear them when in a live event because of the weather outside.
Sure.
There are power outages and things like that where you wouldn't be able to hear. So that's why we, again, encourage people to have multiple ways to get these messages. But if you hear the outdoor warning sirens go off, or you get a message about a tornado warning in Johnson County, that's telling you to seek shelter immediately and look for additional information. So if you hear, you don't have to hear more than one of those. If you hear that and it's not the first Wednesday of the month, seek shelter and look for additional information.
Sure. So I actually had someone just yesterday talk to me about how long those sirens go off in sense of a tornado event. And they thought, well, I think they said, our sirens only go off for 2 minutes because otherwise the siren burns up. But that's not quite right?
Well, it is a little bit.
Okay.
So the way that the sirens work is that when we activate them, they sound automatically for 3 minutes and they stop. The reason that we don't have them go off continuously through a tornado warning is that they do have a limited amount of power. If the power gets disconnected, if there's a storm, many times there's power issues. And so they all have batteries and backup, but they only have enough for a certain amount of sounding. And I believe it's around 15 minutes, and so about 5 blasts. And so what we do is when we sound the sirens, our policy is that we sound them every 10 minutes during a tornado warning.
Okay.
So you'll hear the sirens for 3 minutes, and then there will be a 7-minute lapse where you wouldn't hear it, and then we'll sound it again until National Weather Service cancels the warning or it's expired.
Okay, very good. So how did this zoning work in relation to last week's storms?
Right, so you can see on this map that there are these blue polygons that are labeled with different zone numbers. And so when we sound the sirens, we can sound all of them at once, and that's our procedure. If we'll sound all of them, or if we know that the threat is confined to a specific zone or zones, then we will sound just those zones. So we can sound all of them, or one of these, or multiple zones. And so we have a diagram over here.
Yeah, let's take a look at that.
Show you. This shows the tornado warnings from last Wednesday night, And these polygons are created by the National Weather Service
Okay.
based on the information that they have. And there were 2 different warnings. The first one is here, and you can see that it covered this zone, one in the southeast, and just clipped this one up here. And if it touches just the line, we sound it because we want to make sure that we've got the right coverage. We don't have any. This one wasn't activated. There are actually no sirens in this zone, so that's why you see that not activated. But so we sounded all of these except for Zone 4 on Wednesday for that initial for the initial warning, and then for the second warning we sounded the same set of zones.
So that means that some areas of the county would not have had their sirens activated. So specifically this zone here, which would have been DeSoto, Shawnee, southern part of Bonner Springs, if for the folks there who said, "Hey, I didn't hear any sirens," that was intentional, right?
That's exactly right, and it's tough because there are areas in Johnson County that technically weren't under a tornado warning but did hear the sirens. But then, like you point out, there are areas in Johnson County that they weren't under the warning, and so we didn't activate the sirens. And the reason that we try and limit it the best we can is that we want to make sure that when people hear the sirens, they know that it's a real event and that we've narrowed it down so that we're not alarming people that don't need to be. And I think many of the people are aware when the sirens are going off in the rest of the county, and it's on the news and they hear from their friends. But we want to make sure that we're as precise as we can be. We err on making sure that people receive the notification if there's any question, but we don't want to sound the sirens for people that don't need to get that one.
Yeah, that was news for me in this weather event because as you talked about before about what shows up on cable and the news, they often identify the tornado warning areas by county, and they don't identify it by the zones that we use for the sirens. And so I think that may have been confusing for a lot of folks, that difference. So I think that's really helpful for sharing that.
As technology improves, we hope to one day be able to sound sirens only for the area that is impacted by that tornado warning. Maybe a little bit of a buffer zone around that as well. But we'd like to be a little bit more surgical with that so that, again, we're sending out the most accurate warning we can.
And probably the value of that is that if the broader or the wider your area is beyond that storm, if people are having to take shelter a lot for times when they don't feel the effects of the severe weather, then perhaps when a severe weather event happens, they would not react because it hasn't necessarily been an emergency in the past, right?
That's exactly right. We spend a lot of time looking at communities and researching communities that have been through disasters, have had impacts, a lot of fatalities from tornadoes. And when sociologists and others go into those communities afterwards to figure out why maybe were there some people that didn't listen to the sirens or didn't take action because when they heard it, and what we've heard time and time again is that the sirens were going off all the time and we never really knew if it was a real thing or not. And so we've had this policy in place for a very long time, and we review it every year with our partners and look at other jurisdictions throughout the nation to see what the best practice is, and that's where we've landed.
Okay, very good. So you mentioned earlier that we do a monthly test of the sirens, typically the first Wednesday of the month, except for it's happening today because last Wednesday was really bad weather. So talk a little bit about how the county works with cities to do that test and to maintain those sirens.
Sure. So I'm glad you brought that up. When we do have some question about the potential for severe weather, like last Wednesday, which was the first Wednesday, we talk with other siren owners throughout the KC metro area, and we kind of make a decision collectively about are we going to do the test or not.
Sure.
And we decided last week that it looked like there was severe weather was on people's mind. We didn't want to confuse people, and so we didn't do the test. We postponed it to this week. But the way that works is that we have a fairly elaborate testing process where we test different elements of the system every month from different locations. We can sound these sirens from different locations just to make sure that we've got efficient backup. We use different techniques and different siren repeaters, radio repeaters. So we we have a system to make sure that all of those are working all the time. And then the cities use those opportunities to evaluate from their standpoint. Some of them send people out into the field to visibly watch and hear the sirens be activated, and we coordinate that tightly with them about how and when we do those tests.
Yeah. So whenever the sirens go off, whether it's the monthly warning or in the case of those severe weather, we often hear from folks on social media or otherwise, hey, I didn't hear my siren today.
Right.
So what might be some reasons why a person wouldn't hear their siren? You talked a little bit about that a moment ago, but maybe some more detail. And then when we get those reports, what do we tend to do with that information?
Well, first off, we really appreciate receiving those reports. We hear from people that say that they did go off, and sometimes that they weren't sure, or they were pretty certain that they didn't go off.
Sure.
And we appreciate hearing that information, especially if they think there's a problem.
Right.
When we get that information, we share that with the siren owners, the cities, and then they work with the vendor to evaluate what's the issue and what they need to do to resolve it.
Sure.
We also, in addition to the audible test that occurs every month, we do have a test that is silent that we conduct every morning at 4 a.m. and it sends a signal out to the sirens to check and verify that they're all in a ready status.
Okay.
And same thing goes there. When we see anything that's a problem, potential issue, we communicate with the cities about that.
And the public wouldn't know anything about, like they wouldn't be able to tell you're doing that 4 a.m. test, right? Because that's completely silent and all on the technology.
Exactly.
Okay. So we talked about sirens, we talked about the weather event. The other thing we got a lot of questions about was NotifyJoCo. So can we talk a little bit about NotifyJoCo?
Certainly, yeah. We've got our website over here. NotifyJoCo is the county's mass notification system, and this is we encourage people to go to NotifyJoCo.org, and you can sign up for free for emergency alerts, and there are also some opt-in alerts and notifications you can sign up for as well.
Sure.
In addition, you can opt in for weather alerts, and the majority of the people that do create an account in NotifyJoCo do sign up for weather alerts.
Sure.
And so those are tornado watches or warnings, and you can also sign up for severe thunderstorm watches.
Okay, very good. So we heard some folks saying, hey, I moved my family in the room. Some people in the room got NotifyJoCo messages, and some people didn't. Why might that be the case?
Good point, right. So when you sign up in NotifyJoCo, you have the opportunity to put up to 5 different locations. I, for instance, have my work location, my home, my son's school, places that if there was an emergency in that area, I'd want to be notified about.
Sure.
And so when the way that the system works is that when there's a tornado warning for that one of those specific areas that you've identified, you would receive that warning. So again, similar to the area that wasn't activated for the sirens because of the location of the tornado warning, same goes for NotifyJoCo, is that if you don't have a specific location that's under that tornado warning or that watch, you wouldn't receive that notification.
Is that also true if you haven't set up any locations on your profile, that you wouldn't receive those weather notifications?
So we've set it up so that I believe it forces you to identify at least one location in there, so that for those that do sign up for weather alerts, to make sure that you receive those.
Okay, so for last week, if you set up your location to be Shawnee, DeSoto, any place in that top zone that didn't get activated, that would be why you didn't receive a NotifyJoCo alert. But if you would have been in any of those other zones and you set up your location there, you should have received a NotifyJoCo. If folks think they have it all set up right, then they didn't get the message, they can get some help, right?
Similar to the siren system, if people feel like that something didn't work out or they have a question, we encourage them to contact us. You can call us at 913-826-5555, and we'll get back with you about that. All the people that called in the last week regarding that question about I signed up for weather alerts and I didn't receive them.
Sure.
We took every one of those and researched it and found out that for the ones that we were made aware of, they were locations that weren't in the tornado warning, and that's why they didn't receive it. But if people feel like that there might be some discrepancy, we want to know because we from time to time we have a great relationship with the vendor, and we've identified a little thing here or there, and it's only that we get that feedback when we're able to make little changes.
Sure. And some of those zones that would have received the notifications, those aren't set in city boundary lines, right? So you could have 2 people who both live in the same city, when one might get the notification and one might not. Is that
exactly
right?
Yeah, the NotifyJoCo is a very precise warning system, and so We have notifications that go out on a regular basis that will notify one side of a city block and not the other. We can go down to the house and be that precise. So it can be that precise depending on the address.
That's great. So it's NotifyJoCo.org. You want to register now if you haven't already, or then sign in, and that's how you can customize your profile. And so that's really helpful. In addition to weather alerts, you can also get information about other emergencies happening in the county if they were to happen, such as a water main break or a chemical spill of some kind. All those types of things you could get information on. So that's a really helpful piece. Thanks, Dan, for taking some time with us today and walking us through this. Was there anything else that would be helpful for us to know just as we're jumping into severe weather season?
Sure. I think the key thing to remember is that to make sure that you're able to be informed about severe weather is to have multiple ways to receive that information. So a NOAA weather radio is a great investment if you don't already have one. Think about everywhere that you live, play, and work, and do you know all the places that you would seek shelter if you need to? And then know that when you get that notification, whether it's in weather radio or NotifyJoCo or hear the sirens, know what to do and to seek shelter immediately and look for additional information.
That's great. There's lots of resources online about the ways you can prepare for severe weather, such as what type of supplies you might want to have in your safe area. So check out online for that. We have some information on the emergency management website, but also you can just do a Google search and find out a lot of that great information. If you have questions that we didn't get answered today, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will definitely get back to you. And if this information was helpful to you and you think others in our county would like to know it, please share this video with them and help spread the word, help people be more informed and safe during severe weather. Thanks, and have a great day.